Welcome to the latest installment of CEO Insights with the Columbus Chamber of Commerce. I'm Colleen Marshall, happy to be back with you, and today we are talking to Brent Crawford from Crawford Hoying. Well, let's start at the beginning. This is quite an enterprise you've built at a fairly young age. How did you get all this off the ground?
Well, it's a big question. We don't have that much time, but I'll give you the Cliff Notes.
I'll give you some time.
I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. I've told the story a number of times, but went to high school in Batavia, Ohio. Coming up to Columbus, Ohio State. Always wanted to come here. My best friend come. Not really an idea what I wanted to do, but got in communications. Actually, I wanted to be a newscaster. I wanted to be in sports and or politics, so I started out in that arena. But my landlord, first landlord in college, I moved into his house. Very interesting guy. Said, "Hey, can you do some work for me on the side? Drywall, things like that." And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to do that and make some extra money."
Did you know how to do this ahead of time?
I did, just from my parents. My parents
Okay.
were pretty handy, and my dad had taught me some stuff, and I like to work hard and love landscaping and things like that. So he'd ask if I would do it, and I said, "Sure, I'd love to." But while I was doing that, he bought a second house and a third house on the same street. And I was watching the entire time. I thought, man, I could do this. This seems like something possible to me. And one of the reasons is, I've always said Monopoly was my favorite game and still is today. And it really just felt like that. That's all this is. He's buying one property and another one. How many houses can we get on the same street? And that was sort of the beginning of the thought, anyway, of what I wanted to do for buying properties. And ended up that next year going to my parents and saying, "I'd like to do this. I'd like to buy a house and move my friends in with me." And after a very long process, came from humble beginnings. My parents couldn't quite get it done to help me get all the way there. So I ended up borrowing $1,500 from my girlfriend's grandmother. Was the start of the company in that respect. And so she loaned the money to me. I bought my first property, moved my friends in. And I can tell you the day I closed on the property, I knew what I was going to do the rest of my life.
So the girlfriend, is she still in the picture?
She is. She's my wife of 27 years coming up this July.
Did you pay the $1,500
I did.
back
It was
to
the first thing
Grandma
I
with
did.
interest?
With interest. It's true story. I paid her back with interest right away. And again, knew right away that's what I wanted. So I was quickly thinking, how do I get the second house or the third house?
Okay, but it's a lot different than being a one-house, two-house person.
It is.
To being the size company that you have here today. Did you have this vision when you started out?
I can't say that I did, no. I think a lot of groups like ours, and if you look in Columbus, there are a lot of sort of legacy and real estate companies similar to ours. They started in the same way. One house on campus or one house in Columbus. And I don't think any of them visioned what they have today. It just builds on itself over a period of time. And I think once you gain the confidence and understanding of how the business works, then it's a numbers game. The process doesn't really change. So whether you have 10 properties or 1,000 properties or 10,000 properties or properties like a bridge park, for me, I don't think of it in the sense of, oh, it's this big. It's just what can we do great together? And then out of that process, we use the phrase all the time, do great things with great people and you get great results. And that's how we look at it. And that's why the organization just continues to grow, because we don't really focus on numbers per se or even money in that respect. Because if you do those other things, you'll be a profitable business. And so, I can't say that I did. I know when I got to the first 100, I thought, well, there's no limit now of what's possible. And I think that's the other part of, sort of the culture we've tried to create here is have no limits. You're only limiting yourself by your own brain and what you're capable of.
But having that campus area housing, which is, I'm assuming, was the first
Yeah, it
housing
was.
you did. So you are starting out with campus area rental properties,
Yep.
and you have, we picture those campus area housing, that's not luxury housing. So how do you think that gave you an appreciation of what it means to be a renter and what it means to start out in a house like that?
100%. Yeah. I wanted to provide a different experience. I had been in a slumlord experience before, and I knew that that's not what I wanted to give to my clients that I was leasing to. So I worked really hard to provide a nice property and then great service to them. And I think it did give the perspective as we've gotten bigger, what does the customer want and need? And I think also on the side with our teammates that we work with every day, having been in the field and done it myself, I think they at least respect and appreciate the fact that I had gotten my hands dirty at one point for a long time and really did most of the maintenance and turn work for 10 plus years, turning hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of units over those time frames and painting them and cleaning them and doing all the maintenance work. And I used and think about that a lot when you're asking somebody else in the company to do something. Having done it before means a lot, both to me and to them.
You know, I have to ask you this before I forget. On the Monopoly game, are you the top hat?
I was a big battleship guy. Yeah, that was my go-to every time. My brother would try to take the battleship from me, and I was angry about it every time. So he knew to try to grab that first.
But when you started out and you said housing, now you've got massive projects.
Yeah.
When did you said you had that first 100, but when did you realize this is a leap into a different kind of development? I am going to create a community.
Yeah, I would say it's been an evolution for sure, not a single day or a moment that happened. I think a lot of it comes down to the relationships you build and the partners you have. And so in our case, lending is a huge part of what we do, right? You have to have great lending partners, great local banks, and we've had great support from them. And then, on an investment perspective, we have great partners, investors in what we do. And as we grew the business and realized they're there for us, they're partners with us, they most importantly trust us to do what we do and do it well, provide a return to them, pay off our lenders, those sorts of things. And you realize whether it's a $5 million loan, a $50 million loan, or a $500 million loan, as long as you execute, you can do whatever you want to do, especially when you have the trust of people that you work with.
But when you started out 30 years ago, the housing market in this area was very, very different.
Yes, very much so.
And even I remember when I moved here, I live in the Hilliard area now, those were farm fields when I got here in the mid 80s. This is a completely different dynamic now. Has it changed in the way that you would have wanted it to change?
I think so. It's hard for Bridge Park. Certainly, we feel that way. This is what I think the community had asked for and wanted. I'd like to say that this was all of our idea, but the city of Dublin had put together the Bridge Street district prior to us starting, which was generally a rough framework for what they wanted to see, which is dense, mixed-use, walkable, really to retain and attract young people, and that has absolutely worked, and also retain and attract companies. A lot of companies in Dublin that I know personally that would have left, that made the decision to stay either in Bridge Park specifically or in Dublin because of what it's created here. So this is the kind of project we're passionate about. We're not ones necessarily to go out to a cornfield, drop some units in. Not to say we've never done it, but it's not where our passion is today. It's really, how do you create an environment that people want to be in? And what we're most proud of about Bridge Park is that people are coming not just from Dublin, of course, or Hilliard or Worthington, but they're coming, from Marysville and from Cleveland, from Cincinnati, from Dayton. We're pulling regionally now, which is a great feeling that the word has spread. Like, hey, this is a great place to go hang out for a day or a week.
When we first heard about what Bridge Park was meant to be, a lot of us were like, wait, they're doing what?
Yeah.
They're taking a little strip in Dublin and I don't understand what is going to be happening. Did you feel like that when the cities first talked to you, or did you go to the city of Dublin and say, I want to be part of this?
Well, we knew about the framework that they were planning, but we identified the land ourselves, put the land in contract, and went to them after the fact and said, hey, we have an idea for this particular property. We think it fits well with your framework and what you're trying to build here, fits within our passions. And to do something like this, that's the only way it can work, is in partnership, meaning you have to have a city who wants the same thing. You have to have residents that generally want the same thing. You're never going to get 100%, but I think our approval ratings here are really, really high for Bridge Park and what it's done for Dublin. So the only way it works is if everybody's aligned in that respect. And I think another big part of it for us, and it's true of anything we do, is you can't be afraid. Fear is a dangerous thing, and especially in our world, and I would say most real estate developers don't have a lot of fear, right? And so I don't think of it in terms of fear. I have friends in other businesses and they're like scared to death of the thought of even doing what we did. And I don't take credit for it because I think it's a genetic thing. I just don't feel fear in that sense. I think put a great framework together, great people, execute on a plan, and it'll work out just fine. And that's the tack that we've taken from the beginning.
Well, I remember Cameron Mitchell Restaurants were early on plugging into this development. Is that how you build it? Oh, okay, here's a big name that's buying into this and believing in us, and one by one, others will come along? For
sure. We went to Cameron pretty early because he's obviously has a great reputation in Columbus. People knew that typically if he's part of something, it's probably going to be successful. And so we did go to him early, and it took some work on our end to convince him that, hey, this is the right move for you, because he was really the first restaurant to announce, and he had some risk. What if it failed? What if the development didn't take off? And He had one restaurant, there was one building, and nobody lived here. And so he had to have faith in us. We had done Hudson 29 on Lane Avenue with him, which had gone very well, and we still own that today. And it's been a great restaurant for him, a great development for us. So we had some confidence, but much of what we do then and now is all about partnerships and relationships. So it's leveraging, talking to, partnering with people like Cameron, whether it be George, local cantina, and others that have come who we have long-term relationships with. They've developed confidence in us that if we're going to do something and execute on something, it's going to be successful.
Let's talk about some of these tenants. The North Market, that had to be a real gem for you.
It was, yeah.
Did that also, was there a domino effect to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had been talking with them for a little while, but probably more importantly, they had been trying to do something somewhat, do a second North Market, but trying to find the right dynamics that will make it work, both economically, demographics, draw the right amount of people in an area to be able to support it. And so we went to Rick with the North Market idea here. It was in his words said one of the first times he's like, this actually could work here. So that's been a great catalyst because of course employers want to be around those sorts of things. Much of what we're trying to create here is employee retention and attraction. So if we're competing for ourselves as an example with a potential employee and they're looking at a different company of similar type, but maybe in a suburban market, suburban in the sense of not walkable, we win for the most part all the time. And that's what we want our other employers that are here as well. And they tell us that their retention turnover or their turnovers dramatically dropped since they came to Bridge Park, because if you work here, and you can live here if you also chose, but you want to go to lunch, you can go to the North Market or 15 other restaurants here. You have free parking, convenient parking. So it's trying to put all those mixes together, and the North Market certainly helped bring a lot of attention and interest from tenants.
What has this done for the city of Dublin?
I think great things. When we originally announced it, of course, there's always going to be pushback. The economic portion of this is a very important portion, and I'm talking about on the incentive side. Often people think, I hear the term greedy developer a lot. And the reality is they just have to financially work. We have to ensure, because we're making big bets. As I said, we don't feel risk, but we're also not dumb. And you can't make bets up front that can't work financially. And so the city had to make a big investment up front. And the pedestrian bridge, which to us was the most critical piece to the entire development being successful, roads had to be changed, infrastructure had to be put in. But I think they would tell you, and we're confident in saying that their return has been dramatically larger than what they ever anticipated, whether it be bed tax from the hotels, the retained revenue from all the employers that stayed here, the payroll tax coming in now, the residents that are here that are out spending money at all the restaurants and bars. And so I think it's done wonderful things. I'm confident to say residential properties around here, homes and so forth, have seen their values increase dramatically because they're within walking distance or bike riding distance to Bridge Park. So I think in that respect, it's been very helpful as well.
And it's got to be a model for other communities. And I don't just mean in Ohio.
Yeah.
I imagine you're getting attention from around the country because we hear that term, a walkable community.
Yeah.
This is a walkable community.
Yeah, it is. And it's very true. We've traveled quite a bit here in the last year to different communities that have asked us to come and look to see what's possible. We are looking in multiple markets right now, including Central Ohio, outside of Ohio, Dayton, Cincinnati. We have a number of big developments there. But we're looking out of state as well. And it takes the right mix to make it work, to do something like this. City support is a huge part of it, not just financially, but their commitment to it is critical. So you don't want to go in a market where you're not wanted. And we don't want to do that for a neighborhood either. If the neighborhood doesn't really want us there, we don't want to be there. We don't want to do what the neighborhood doesn't want. There's sometimes we have to help make them believe a little bit. Like to say,
Make them want?
Yeah, make them want. Yeah, because it's a little bit scary, right? If you say you're going to drop something like this in the middle of your neighborhood, what's it going to do to me? And often people think it's going to reduce my property values, but the facts are it increases your property value. So walking them through the education portion of that and what it means for a community. But yes, we're on the phone almost every single day with some different municipality or landowner wanting us to come do it on their property. But we're pretty particular at this point. We don't want to mess this up. What we've built as a company, reputationally, we want to go and do things that are amazing. And again, we want the community to really support it and be behind it.
When I heard about the new Intel project coming in out there in the New Albany area, I thought, what are they going to do for housing? They're bringing in 3,000 jobs.
Yep.
That means 3,000 people with families and children who need schools and who need housing. Is this the kind of a development that you could see out in that area, making a difference and making some opportunities for people who are going to have these high income jobs?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've certainly looked out in that area. We would love to do something similar on that side of town, and certainly could support it. I mean, the amount of housing that's going to be required is off the charts. Not even separate from Intel even coming. We're already running a significant shortfall in housing, both in Columbus, Ohio, and nationally right now. So that really comes down to density. This is density. This is what old Dublin would have never allowed, right? It's a house an acre or maybe two an acre, but they didn't want the density. But the reality in today's world, that just doesn't work economically anymore. And so it's critical to allow density, and I'm sure they'll adapt to that out there as well.
When you thought about this development, you must have a target tenant, and I'm talking about housing type tenants, who you want to look at these properties, because you have to think about income and what kind of a lifestyle they may want, what kind of a size of a unit would we be able to market effectively. So what went into that thought process of how we're going to attract people to live here?
Yeah, I mean, to make something like this successful, you have to attract everyone. So this doesn't really work if we would have only brought empty nesters or only millennials or workforce. You have to really try to bring all gamuts, and the only way to do that is different sizes of units, different pricing of units, bringing a lifestyle that's attractive to everyone. So there was a point here where, from an empty nester perspective, we were more than 50% empty nesters here, hugely popular. People selling their homes in Muirfield and Wedgwood and places like that, downsizing. They come here, they've got everything they need within walking distance. At the same time, we have the amenities that young people want. And so it's been a tremendous blend, and I've got a great chance to talk to a lot of our older residents who live here, and they love, some in their 70s and 80s and 90s for that matter, who love living next door to somebody who's 24. They love the energy and excitement of it, but you have to attract really from all segments. One, for this number of units that we have here to support that, but also, again, to support the varying kinds of bars and restaurants that we have here. You want to attract lots of different people, not just to live here, but to visit as well.
To live here and to spend money here.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's not cheap living here.
No, it's not.
Talk to me about the price range and the size range of these units, because you had to have a lot of forethought into how we're going to blend this community.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we did want to make sure is that everyone could afford to live here. And that means a different thing in today's world relative to the size of units. We realize in today's economic cycle, and especially with where inflation is right now and cost of construction, we can't build a 2,000 square foot unit for someone and have it be $800. It just doesn't work here. But what we can do is deliver a smaller unit that allows somebody to live in a place that they want to live and work at a price point that's, say, $800 or $900. Again, in a smaller unit.
How small?
In the 500s, so studio apartments basically.
Okay.
But they leased all immediately here with lots of workers in that also work here as well. And that's just, again, tremendous vibrancy for us. Also cuts down on traffic because people live and work here. They walk to work. We have a number of people that work in this office that also live here. So they're walking to work every day.
So it is convenient.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I live just on the other side of the bridge. I'd like to tell you that I walk across the bridge every day. People in our company would laugh to say I do it very rarely, but I have reasons. It could be raining, it could be cold. I might need a car for something. Yeah, it might be tired. Right? It's a very long 2-minute walk. But so we try to hit all ranges there just to ensure that everybody could afford to live here. And it's the biggest challenge that not only we're facing, the country's facing relative to rents, where inflation has taken the cost of construction now. It is something that just has to be dealt with, for sure.
And that brings us to what we have to talk to you about, which is the supply chain issues.
Yeah.
As long as a year ago, we started hearing about the price of wood.
Yeah.
And how transporting it, buying it, was making it very difficult for developers. Now it's everything, right?
Everything. Yep. Labor, every material that goes into everything we build. And it depends on the type of development that we're building, but construction prices are up 20 to 30% in a year. And so a lot of the developments just don't work now. So you've certainly seen some pause in construction, not fully because there's lots of building going on, but it's much, much harder to make it work right now financially. The only thing that's supporting it, one, is interest rates are still low. So we're still borrowing at a relatively low cost, and rents have risen significantly. But they had to rise in order to be able to afford it. Otherwise, these developments don't happen And I was mentioning earlier with the shortage in housing right now, that's the last thing we can have is a significant pause in housing being built. And it's really one of the reasons we're in the situation we are now is what happened in the last year there was certainly some delays, some projects stalled fully, either couldn't get materials or people just sort of said, hey, I need to wait and see what's happening in the marketplace. So we have, in Columbus as an example, 30,000 plus new people coming a year. Well, we're not building nearly that. So there's only one thing rents can do, which is to go up. So to stop that pace, we need to build more units.
But also, even young people who are looking to buy units or to buy not just condos, but to buy single family homes, the market has been horrendous. I work with some young people who I know were looking for a house for a year before they could find something that they could afford that was not being priced. Something would go for sale and it would go way above the asking price. Do you think that young people who are trying to buy today are going to find themselves underwater?
I think it's possible, but I will say this: there's so much liquidity in the system. Obviously, what happened in 2008 could happen again, but it's a different situation. The reason 2008 happened was because of the economic collapse related to the banks.
Right.
Real estate was fine. It's the banks brought down the real estate. We don't have that now. Banks are as healthy as they've ever been. They're more flush with cash. Companies are flush with cash for the most part, and wages have gone up. Unfortunately, they've been offset by all the cost increases in food and fuel and housing, of course. But I think we have a little runway left in us. I don't think that housing prices are going to suddenly plummet. I certainly think they will plateau.
But we also know, not just because of Intel, but this is an area that is growing and the housing market is strained.
Yep.
So what about affordable housing? What do we do to properly house lower income families?
Yeah. As I said earlier, it's the biggest issue that our country probably is facing right now. People don't realize if you're comfortable in your house and you can afford your payment, you don't think about it. But right now we're roughly 7 million housing units short in the U.S. just on the affordable side. And we're building around 110,000 units a year, just truly affordable right now. So we're far short. We'll never, ever catch up in that process. But it's going to take an effort from everybody. Again, sometimes I'll make the mistake of reading comments at the bottom of articles relative to real estate development, and people talk about developers and so forth. It's not about how much money you might make. It's really, could you even build it? Because affordable housing truly, from an economic perspective, without any city support, would lose tens of millions of dollars depending on the size, or you would just impossible to make a deal work. So how do you bridge the gap? And it has to be from so many different fronts. The developers certainly have to play a piece in it. The federal government, state governments, and I think some of the other big pieces that are in it is that we have to change the mentality that not in my backyard syndrome that's been around for a long time. People say they want affordable housing, but they just don't want it in their neighborhood. And the reality is we need affordable housing in the areas where the jobs are, for one, just even from a transportation perspective. If people live and work in the same area and they can be on a bus line. I always use the Short North as a great example. There needs to be more affordable housing down there. One way to do that is density. We need density and height, but so many of these local areas and municipalities have capped the height of the buildings. Well, it just makes the buildings more expensive to build. The higher we go, the better chance we have to make affordable units possible. And so they've kept affordable housing away in their areas by doing a number of things, density being one, by saying, hey, we're only going to allow so much density. Well, that immediately makes it unaffordable in many respects, or to call it affordable housing. Height restrictions certainly play, and even materials, by saying all of these buildings have to have these very expensive materials, which means the costs go up, which means we have to get higher rent in order to afford to do it. And so that plays a big, big role in this.
So whose role is it to break through this? Who has a bigger responsibility for creating affordable housing, developers or government?
Government has to take the lead. Or
the rest of us?
Well, I think all of us play a role, but government has to take the lead on it. There's not a scenario in which a developer, because we have to remember that developers, are crafting and building something. There's still a lender that's involved, right? And the lender wants to know they can get paid back. And the reality is, again, affordable housing deal without any city support, whether it's federal tax housing credits and other ways to help, are underwater immediately. So you're not going to be able to get a loan to build it, and you can't attract investment. And a lot of this comes down, you need capital to build these. And so the federal government has to take a lead on it. I think the unfortunate thing for me is I think about it, and I mentioned the numbers earlier, we will never build enough. It's just almost not physically possible to build enough housing And that's only treating the symptom, right? The issue is that the incomes aren't high enough. Because if the incomes were high enough, we wouldn't have to be subsidizing all of it on the back end. So the federal government's paying for it in some respects one way or another. But what if we had a better economic situation in our country where all the incomes were lifted and people could afford to live it, and we didn't have to build 500 square foot apartments. Everybody could live in a reasonably sized apartment, live in the same communities. And there are ways to do it. Again, density, parking restrictions are a big part of it, parking requirements. Whether it's short north or downtown, you have to have so many parking spots. Well, if we're in areas where the jobs are, we may not need as many parking spots. So the more those spots are very, very expensive to build. And again, just adds into it. I think another huge part of it is the zoning approvals, how long it takes.
Those zoning things, I've heard developers talk about this
Yeah.
before. It's not something that happens in a reasonable, couple of months is one thing.
Right.
It can be years,
Years,
right?
yep, years. And that adds, in some cases, millions of dollars to the cost of a development. So they might think they're helping and they're getting a better product, but at the end of the day, you end up stripping out the quality of the product or having to raise the rents to such a level to make the deal work. And so we need to figure out a way to shorten the zoning and the approval process. Some cases, depending on where you might be going through one body, two body, three different groups of people, some of them with differing ideas and opinions, to get to the same final answer. And that makes it really, really difficult for a developer because you're incurring massive costs as you're going along.
We also hear so much about workforce development here in Central Ohio. A lot of employers are saying, I've got the job, I don't have the people.
Yeah.
How's it been in your industry keeping staffed up?
We're massively short. And all the trade skills are really, really short. And I think, if I could say something to the city, and it would be one thing, which would be we really need to push our trade schools. Kids go to college now, incur this massive college debt, come out with not an idea of what they want to do, and maybe they weren't necessarily meant for college. You could come out now and be an electrician, a plumber, and make really, really good money and do it in a much faster time frame without all the debt. Just huge shortfalls right now in all of those areas. And it's not going to be addressed by our population as it is now. I mean, we need to fix immigration policy. Has to be fixed because the reality is a lot of our workers on construction sites are Latino. They do great work in this community and around the country. And right now we're just massively short. There just are not enough workers to do all the work. And especially as we mentioned earlier, we have a huge shortfall in housing as it is. So we need even more to be built, but there aren't enough to build what's being proposed right now.
I grew up in a blue collar family in a blue collar town in Appalachia. And that generation, we want our kids to go to college. College was pushed as the sign of success.
Yep.
That's not necessarily the case anymore, is it?
And it shouldn't be. I don't want it to be. I mean, I think even when I grew up in a blue collar town and a home. If you across the street was an electrician, he was held up very high. Electrician was, very, very well respected.
My dad was an electrician.
Yeah, right. And so somehow we lost that in society where people doing these incredible jobs, very, very important jobs, have lost community respect in some manner. And also from a pay perspective, when I was growing up, if you were an electrician, we were thought you were very upper middle class, at least in the community that I grew up in. And somehow that got lost along the way. And people pushing, everybody has to go to a 4-year degree. Everybody has to do something online, whatever the case may be. But we've lost out on just a whole generation of kids who could be filling the gaps right now. And by the way, making a lot of money.
So do you do any internship programs or do you work with trade schools to let them know if you learn this skill, we will hire you?
Yeah, absolutely. We work with the city of Dublin through their high school program, through tolls and others, and certainly have talked with the city administration about it, with the governor's office about how do we help push this, because people talk about needing jobs. The jobs are there right now. And whether it be electrician or plumber or framer or any of these are jobs that can be had relatively quickly. I mean, in the training, it's not 5 years of training or 5 years of college. You can get through a program relatively quickly, and you're in need right now. If you any of my friends in those trades businesses will tell you they have multiple openings across the board, and would hire virtually not sight unseen, but easy to get a job right now in those trades. And again, they pay really well.
We talked a little earlier about the short north and being on a bus line, and certainly this area, you don't think of that. But the Short North was always known for so long as being the place to go for dinner. Mm-hmm. It's the trendy night spot for a Friday or a Saturday night out. That's starting to be Bridge Park now.
Yeah.
And do you think that you are maybe having some envy from neighborhoods like the Short North or Grandview, because you can come here and go out to dinner at a great restaurant and you can find a place to park?
Yeah. We hear that a lot, certainly. We have friends that own restaurants down there. Cameron owns restaurants down there, right? So we know what we're doing relative to numbers to what they're doing, and it certainly has become a very strong restaurant destination for Central Ohio. You can tell from credit card receipts and, of course, reports from our restaurateurs who all do extremely well here. I think the parking is a huge portion. Having available and free parking at all times makes a big difference. I think the other thing for downtown and the Short North in general right now is there needs to be a return to work. And it's not to get too political as it relates to COVID or anything else, but without having workers down there, the restaurants are suffering. And then you have restaurants closing. And when you have boarded up storefronts and closed areas and you don't have people around, crime is more likely to happen. So, and then it's feeding on itself. So as the crime has increased, it's put pressure from people not wanting to live in the Short North or downtown. So we need to get, I think, people back to work to support the businesses so there's vibrancy again down there. And those are individual choices that every CEO has to make for their company, but certainly feel that it's important to get people back as quickly as we can.
But there's also the belief that maybe we'll never have all the people back to work because so many people are finding remote work to be easy and productive. Is that a concern for you as a developer that maybe this is going to stunt some of the development?
Well, I do have strong opinions as it relates to that piece.
Well, let's hear them.
Yeah, so my opinion is in a couple of years from now, we'll open up the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and it'll say stay at home is dead. Do I believe it's 100% dead? No, but I think it'll dramatically change when companies realize that your company cultures are being destroyed by the day. I would tell young people, if you're looking, in the workforce right now and you want to get a new job, do not take a job at home. It's all about learning who your bosses are, who the people you work with, developing relationships. Whether or not you execute on a spreadsheet very well is not how you're moving up. It's what relationships you develop.
How you network.
100%. It is truly the water cooler conversations that happen, or what drives careers. It's those relationships. Walking out of work, meeting in the lounge after work to have a conversation, learning about your families and their families, and that's how you develop a great culture, and that's being destroyed by the day. I have friends who were pretty strict with the stay at home, but now have realized and they're bringing their people back as quickly as possible. It's not hurt us in Bridge Park from a leasing perspective. We're leasing our office extremely fast. We're pretty much out of all office here in Bridge Park. We're building another building now, which is a spec office building, and we'll probably do more. Because if you create the right environment, people will come back. So I'm not worried about it. I do think at the end of the day, we are humans, and humans like to be together. I think there's certain job functions that are just fine for stay at home, but I can tell you in our company, we will not be staying at home.
What is the culture of your company? I've noticed you have just a lovely work area here. You have nice lunch area and balconies, and you're in a beautiful building.
Yeah.
But what is the culture that you are trying to grow as you develop this company?
Yeah, people here will know, certainly, and have heard me talk about, it's the thing I'm most passionate about. It's what I think about the most. It's really about creating family. And again, I talked about getting to know each other. It's, we talk about the term proximity. You only love what you're proximate to and what you're close to. And when you bring people together and you spend time together and you learn about them, you start to care about them. And if you care about them, you'll work hard for them and they'll work hard for you. And the pandemic was great in the sense that you'll notice a lot of companies that made it and didn't make it, but maybe in the same industry. And I can almost exclusively tell you why one didn't make it over another. And typically it's because the culture wasn't there. So when times are really, really tough, if you have a great culture, people dig deep for you, for your fellow coworker, for the company in general. And when you don't have a great culture and times are tough, people start to look out for themselves only, not looking at the greater good. And so we spend a lot of time team building, getting to know each other, working closely together. I think also creating a culture of curiosity. We're in lots of different industries, beyond real estate as well, but lots of different segments of real estate. So we're curious about what we do and want all of our people to be curious and also have an equal voice. you wouldn't be working in this company unless we wanted to hear what your opinions were. So it doesn't matter what role you're in, we want you to tell us. So if we're in a meeting and you think it's a bad idea, then tell me it's a bad idea, or tell my partner Bob it's a bad idea, or anybody else. So we want it to be fun too. At the end of the day, if we're not having fun, I don't want to do it. But I can tell you, and you probably know me, I have fun at this. I love it. I cannot wait to get to work every day.
What do you think your employees would say about you if they were asked, what kind of a boss is he?
Oh no. They're probably, when they see this, they'll laugh when they say that. I'm a cheerleader, probably first and foremost. I want to keep the energy up. I want everybody to have fun. I want them to feel supported, to recognize that they have an incredible opportunity here to do whatever they want. We're very much supportive of growth. We want people, you're only great at what you love doing. So if we see somebody struggling or not in a situation that's best for them, what can we do for you? How do we lift you up to be the best you can be? So it might be moving to a different part of the company, and sometimes people leave. And if you're leaving to do something that's better for you, we will help you. We'll support you in any way we can, including in funding or anything else. But I think if you create that environment and people feel trusted, and we can trust each other, then it sort of really opens up. So I think trust is probably another big portion. Understanding the environment we're trying to create here is around trust and love.
Do you think when you borrowed that $1,500 from your girlfriend's grandmother that you, the grandmother, or your girlfriend, who's now your wife, ever envisioned where you would be at this point in your life? You're still a really young guy.
Yep.
To have the success that you've had.
No, I can't say that. I'm growing every day. I mean, I literally learn something every day. It's one reason I love to come to the office and do what we do, is I learn something new every day. I'm curious. We're getting into new businesses and industries now, and I'm passionate about learning about those. But I think I'm just settling into myself. I'll be 50 here in a few months, and I feel like I'm just in the early innings of what I can accomplish as a person and as a business, and with my partner Bob and the rest of our team. Just the sky's the limit. And it's fun to recognize, even in the last few years, my role's changed in the company. As our executive team's grown, and recognizing and having incredible people around you is the most important thing you could do. My role has changed, and so I'm evolving as they are. And so it's not as though I'm 50 and I'm all set in who I'm going to be. I think I'm going to grow significantly in the next few years.
What businesses are you interested in now that you are putting your toe in the water?
So we're really getting pretty heavy into the industrial space. So there's a lot of warehouses being built in Columbus, Ohio. It's one of the hottest warehouse and industrial markets in the United States right now. So as we typically do, once we make a decision to go somewhere, we go and scale. So we're really looking at 7 or 8 different industrial developments right now, one under construction and several more to come. So that's really fascinating to me in that side of the business. We are invested in lots of different operating companies and bars and restaurants, manufacturing, all of which we're fascinated in. In many cases, we're hoping they're accretive to what we do, right? So they're not just fully independent and have no association with what we do. If there's a way we can assist that company through what we do, either grow the business or help operationally, those are things we like to be involved in.
But those are really different. When you talk about being involved in a bar, in a restaurant, and in a warehouse, do you sometimes feel like you're spreading yourself too thin? You're being pulled? That's a lot of different directions to be heading into.
I think it would be if we didn't have the right team in place. So we have a lot of people who have the same mindset that I do. One is, I don't like to sit still. I want to keep moving. I want to keep my brain active. I want to learn and do new things. And our executive team specifically has that same mindset and mentality. And so they're curious too. And really, we also have a lot of just workers. I love to work. I love to do what I do. And the people that are around, certainly here in our office, have that same mentality.
Well, I have to ask you, we are in Bridge Park right now as we tape this interview. And this has to be one of the crown jewels of all your developments. It's a remarkable development. It's done so much for the city.
Yeah.
When you look at something like this, do you think, I can make this even bigger? You mentioned a building under construction.
Yeah.
5 years from now, what should we expect to see here at Bridge Park?
Well, there's a lot left to do here. I think a lot of people think we're about done, but we're really not, because of the land we still own. And so we're already in planning phases for multiple other portions of the development here. So we'll likely see more hotel here, more restaurants, more housing of different types, more retail. So there's a lot left to do. I mean, from a percentage perspective, we're maybe 60% of the way through what we want to do.
So how did you have the foresight to buy that much land in a short amount of time? And how were you able to do that? Once you started buying all this up, didn't the people who own the land start saying, wait, what's happening here? Maybe I should hang on to this property. Did you have
we had to be
trouble
quiet about
doing
it.
that?
It wasn't too bad. We bought the first property in 2012. So you remember coming out of the downturn, really difficult time. People were under stress. You'd put properties up for sale. They could not sell for months or years. That's not the case anymore. You put a commercial property up for sale, if it's of any quality, it's going to sell, virtually immediately. So we bought in at the right time. From a land perspective, we made some key acquisitions surrounding the property in the last 5 years. And so we wanted to make sure we controlled our destiny and what was going to surround us from a competition perspective or even quality perspective, and be able to continue our vision. So it was important for us to pick up some of those pieces.
Well, with the economy the way it is right now, with inflation, the supply chain problems, all the things that we've talked about, what's your advice to a young couple out there? Hold on, don't buy into the market yet, don't look for a house yet, or buy now, it's going to get worse in 2 or 3 years. A lot of young people, including my children, are struggling with these decisions. When do I make that leap and try to buy a home or a condo, or do I just keep renting?
I guess you have to have two thoughts, or at least one saying I use all the time, which is every day that goes by is a day you never get back in investing. And really, when you're buying a home, you're investing, right? So I do have a lot of friends who waited lengthy periods. They kept waiting for the exact right moment to come. I think if you're going to buy today and you want to sell in 6 months, you might want to hold on a little bit. But if you're buying something that you're going to live in and you love the house, buy the house. Because yes, it's very likely housing prices are going to continue to go up for the reasons I mentioned. The only thing that'll slow it in the short term is if we had a dramatic rise in interest rates. But I don't see that happening here in the near term. So prices probably are going to increase. Now, I think the pace of the increases will slow because it's been so dramatic in certain areas. You're talking 20 or 30% in a single year. I mean, unprecedented in history.
And people, not only that, trying to outbid each other in the market because, there was this scarcity of housing.
Yeah. And that's probably not going to abate here in the near term. Again, I think it'll slow a little bit. And we've seen some anecdotal evidence of it slowing. But I still think the price increases are going to continue just at a slower pace. But if somebody wants to be in a home, buy the home. Again, unless you're saying I'm going to buy it now, and it's like investing in the stock market. You can't worry about catching every stock at the right price. You got to buy in, have a plan, execute on the plan, stay in, whether it's going to be a 3 or 5 years, whatever it may be, and know what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, you are building quite the empire here. I know you have 2 children. Is it your hope that someday one or more of them will join this company and maybe carry on the legacy for your family?
Well, it probably won't be in my family. Both of my kids are artists. God love them, and I love. I'm not sure where they got.
So
from.
They like to starve.
Yeah. They both live in Chicago. One actor, our son, although he's going out of that business, going to open a coffee shop in Chicago with his partner, and then my daughter is finishing art school at the Art Institute of Chicago and getting ready to be a teacher. And so they didn't have a lot of interest, but I think it's just how their particular minds worked and hadn't been a part of it. My partner, Bob, or his brother, Tom, who's on the construction side of our business, I could see any number of their kids being interested in the business.
Where do you want this company to go while you're still at the helm? What are you hoping to do that maybe you haven't done yet?
So I think the reason we've gotten to where we are today is I don't say I want to go to here, because I think as soon as you say you're going to do something and you cap what that possibility is, that's generally what you'll go to. So I don't want to ever say, and it's not about a number, right? It seems like what sort of volume do you want to do? I don't think of it like that. It's just how many great things we can do. I think the other thing about the growth and what I want to accomplish is just to continue to add amazing people. That's what gives me the most energy and excitement. It's not whether we got a deal done, it's whether we brought on an amazing person into the company, which we brought some incredible people on in the last year who are helping transform the organization right now. And that's exciting. That's what gets me going.
So if somebody wants to be on your team, what's your advice to them? People are going to hear this and say, I want to work for that guy.
I think, first and foremost, we only do great people. When I say great, you just got to be a nice person. It's one of our key phrases we use. I mean, just be nice, first and foremost. So we want to treat everybody in our world that we work with, and inside the company, outside the company, I would say come with a passion. It's not necessarily a specific skill set. So when we're interviewing people, we're just looking for great people. We can teach you the industry. We can teach you all the various parts of our business. But if you have an incredible personality and you're outgoing and you're passionate about what life is and what life has to bring in terms of a potential career, then you can fit in here.
I know you have developments in other cities, in other states.
Mm-hmm.
You have expanded far beyond your campus
Yep.
area housing.
Yep.
What other markets are you enthusiastic about, and how do they compare to the future you envision for Central Ohio?
Yeah, Central Ohio, we're very lucky. I mean, there's, we certainly haven't researched all the markets in the U.S., but I don't know that you could take me to another market in the U.S. If you said, Brent, would you trade for Nashville or Austin or Charlotte? I don't think I would. I think Columbus is set up so perfectly well, and we hear this from international investors, national investors. Everybody's trying to get to Columbus right now because we have, whether it be the second most college students in the U.S., state capital, healthcare system, banking system that are all here. Yes, we have manufacturing, but not really susceptible to some of the things that we've seen happen over the last 20 years. So, and then even look at little things like lack of earthquakes and tornadoes and things like that are mattering to all of the cloud facilities that are being built here. People recognize that the talent is here. You have the college students again, as I mentioned. So we're just so well positioned in Central Ohio. I want to go to other markets, but there's no rush to do it. We're not going to be careless about it when all of the opportunity in the world is right here in Columbus.
We've seen things like the Columbus Partnership
Mm-hmm.
and certainly the state chamber
Yep.
and some of the local chambers really trying to promote Columbus to the country.
Yep.
Do they try to get you to tap into that? I mean, you would be a perfect salesman for this part of the country and for other developers to come in here. Are you a cheerleader for Central Ohio?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. When I get on calls, especially with groups from out of state and again, California and New York, because investment dollars are pouring into here. Unlike ever before. When I first started in the business here, it was very rare to get somebody from California or Chicago or New York or any of the coasts to come and invest in Central Ohio. Now it's very common, if almost not a certainty, that it's coming from one of those, but also internationally. I mean, there's investment coming from Singapore and from South Africa, from Israel, pouring into Central Ohio, unlike we've ever seen before. And all of those organizations you mentioned do play a huge part in it. I'm very proud and fortunate to be on the Columbus Partnership, get to see the amazing work that they've done. Certainly had a huge factor in Intel being here. They had the vision and the dream and the boldness to go after it, because even Intel would tell you Columbus, Ohio really wasn't on the map when they started the discussions of where they were going to go. But we do what we do, right? We work hard, we dig in. Bunch of great people in that organization. Kenny McDonald leading it now did an incredible job to bring them here, and it's transformational. It's not just Intel, right? They're going to attract, and there already are hundreds of other businesses that need to support them, and then those all need construction facilities, and they need restaurants and hotels and bars and infrastructure and housing. It goes on and on. So I think people get worked up and they say a $2 billion incentive package. We will get the return in spades for that particular investment. And so, I love to cheerlead for Central Ohio. And so anytime I can get on a call and talk about it, I do.
Well, one of the things I was surprised to hear about Intel was they picked that part of Licking County because there are no rail lines there, and they can't have, their very sensitive equipment, they can't have any vibration.
Correct, yeah.
So as we're almost out of time, but before I let you go, what is, from your perspective, the promise of Central Ohio, the hope of Central Ohio, and what you would like to see here going forward?
I guess when I think about Central Ohio and what I describe to people is that's different than other places is the partnership in the community that we have here. If you look at Cleveland and Cincinnati, and not to say bad things, I'm from Cincinnati, but they're always working against each other. Everything's a battle and a fight, whether it be the private sector with the city administration or within themselves. You saw what happened in Cincinnati last year with all the city council members and fighting. We've been very fortunate here that we just have this collaborative nature about us. And that's really why Intel is here. They recognize right away that the governor's office, the city of Columbus, the Columbus Partnership, the utility pieces that are a big part of Intel being there, all working collaboratively together. So I think that's the promise that we bring to anybody who wants to be in partnership with another area is come to Columbus, Ohio. No one in the country is going to work harder as a partnership than we do. And the Columbus Partnership, as an example, has been studied from groups around the world. It's just a model for what can happen if you bring leaders from across all of the sectors together, and this is private, public, healthcare, education, to form a great partnership and support each other. And we do it internally, by the way. I'm friends with, in fact, I have a drink with a developer friend right after that. He's a direct competitor, but we're in Columbus, Ohio. We're all friends. We hang out together. We travel together. That's just not normal. But everybody roots for each other. If I see somebody else announced a great development, I send a text immediately, oh, dude, that's awesome. Congratulations. I wished I would have thought of doing that deal. So I think that's really what Columbus, Ohio is just this incredible partnership and group of people and really kind people.
And you are one of those people who has really shown us how to start with very little and make quite a bit. And we thank you for sharing your wisdom with us for this interview.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.